I want to show you a picture and then ask you a question. Here's the picture. It's a get-along shirt. Here's the question. What would cause a parent to do that? I think we know, right? It's bickering kids. Do you think that shirt, do you think it was working? I mean, the little girl, she was mad, but the little guy, he was having a great time. Same question. What would cause a person to do that? Different scenario. Here's the scenario. Mark chapter 14, verse 64. They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. They didn't just crucify Jesus. They humiliated him. What would cause them to do that? We'll get there. But first, we're teaching through the biblical book of Daniel. Today, we get to the crazy part. Now, in the first 6 chapters of Daniel are likable. We've got Daniel in the lion's den. You got the fiery furnace. You got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the rest of this book, we tend to skip chapters 7 through 12 because these things are confusing. It's called apocalyptic literature, which means it's prophecy about future events. The rest of the book of Daniel is kind of like that beloved book in the New Testament of Revelation. You know, if you're in therapy because you grew up with a Left Behind prophecy chart, you know, it's like stock the pantry with canned goods, bottled water because Osama bin Laden is the Antichrist. Relax. I'm not going to go there. See, I don't believe that God gives us these books to speculate, to create timelines, and to unlock hidden codes. They're tough, but if you stick with me, I believe that with a little bit of teaching, you can understand this part of the Bible. Hang on. Here we go. Daniel 7 starts this way, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. It's already confusing because Belshazzar, he died back in chapter 5, so we're already out of chronological order. We're going back in time about 15 years. Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind, and he was lying in his bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. God gives Daniel this dream, and then he's showing him the future through these dreams. Verse 2. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea." And in order to understand this, it helps to see this. See, Daniel spent most of his life in Babylon. Where's Babylon? Well, Babylon is in the middle of a desert. Babylon is landlocked. See, for Daniel, the sea was frightening and it was dangerous. So the sea here, it symbolizes chaos and evil. Next verse, verse 3. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. Remember, this is a dream. This is symbolism. Daniel's dream here in chapter 7 parallels Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2. Each of these 4 beasts represents a great world empire. For Daniel, this was a prophecy foretelling future events. For us, we live 2,500 years later. 2,500 years, which means most of this isn't the future anymore, it's the past. You and I have the advantage of being able to look back and see and observe how most of this has already been fulfilled through the pages of history. Verse 4. The first was like a lion. It had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. I read this, and my first thought is, somebody call X-Men leader Charles Xavier, because looks like we got a mutant. Look at this image. We got an image here. Daniel sees a beast, looks like a lion, and it's got wings. I read this and think, man, that is bizarre. What is that? What does it mean? Well, the people who were living 2,500 years ago, this was not a mystery to them. This symbol was actually a very common symbol. You can see it here in an ancient relic. There it is, same symbol that Daniel dreamed. It's a lion with wings on it. You know where that image is found? It's found in the Ishtar Gate, which was one of the main entrances into the ancient city of Babylon. See, what we don't know, what they knew, a winged lion, it already was being used to represent the Babylonian Empire. Everybody in that day, they knew what that represented. Verse 5, second beast, and there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides. It had 3 ribs in its mouth. Between its teeth, it was told, get up and eat your fill of flesh. Sounds like a Stephen King horror flick. I mean, the bear, and this bear, he's got 3 ribs just sticking out of his teeth. What is this grisly image? What's it mean? Well, the bear has just eaten, but it's not done yet. He's still hungry. The bear represents the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire, at this time, they had recently eaten or conquered the Babylonian Empire, but Daniel's dream is saying they're not done yet. They're not done conquering yet. It's still hungry. In the years that were to come, Persia was also going to conquer the empires of Egypt and Lydia. You see this now? Do you see this image? 3 ribs, they represented the 3 conquered empires of Babylon, of Egypt, and of Lydia. This conquering hadn't happened yet. God, He knows the future. Beast number 3, verse 6. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. A leopard with 4 heads. This one hadn't happened yet, but looking back, we can recognize this was a prophecy about the coming empire of the Greeks. A leopard. Why a leopard? Well, a leopard is fast. So was Alexander the Great. Go back in your history books. Alexander the Great, this guy conquered the known world in little more than a decade. And he died young, without an heir. His empire was divided among his generals. Any guesses how many generals he had? 4. The 4 wings here, the 4 heads here, represent the 4 generals, the division of the Greek Empire into those 4 regions. Wow. History unfolded just like this. Then in verse 7, after that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. This is like the first 3 beasts on steroids. This one's big, this one's strong, this one's nasty. Many scholars, what they do is they believe that this was fulfilled through the mighty Roman Empire. That corresponds to Nebuchadnezzar's dream, which was in chapter 2, and the 10 horns, well, those point to the line of Roman emperors that came after Julius Caesar, 10 of them. Others take this and they believe that this is about the end times and about an empire that is yet to come. Me? I don't really care. Can I say that? It doesn't really matter. One level, these 4 beasts represent 4 historical empires. But on another level, this is a cycle that keeps repeating itself all throughout history. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, Ming, Ottoman, Turk, the British, the American. Empires rise and empires fall. All of them. One day, ours. Still with me? If not, come back. This dream, this prophetic dream of Daniel, it gets better. He shifts from what's going on earth to what's going on in heaven. Verse 9, as I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. We get here a glimpse of God. He's showing us something about himself. Did you catch the first image that we get of God here? Check it out. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days. Ancient of Days. God referring to himself as the Ancient of Days. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that God has prunes and raisin bran for breakfast? No. Think of it this way. At the Van Rees house, Sarah tends to do the meal planning, and my daughter Lily and I, we do most of the grocery shopping. But Sarah knows that she needs to make sure we have a grocery list, or else our grocery cart is going to look like this. So we were just about done. We had 3 items left on the list. Here they were. It was Nutella, Sun Chips, and pizza rolls. And I thought, that doesn't sound like Sarah. So I looked closer at the list, and it wasn't her handwriting. So I look at my daughter, and here's what I said. I said, "Nice try, Lily, but I wasn't born yesterday." Have you used that phrase? I wasn't born yesterday. Here's what that is. It's an expression that means I've got some life experience. I've acquired some wisdom through the years. Ancient of Days. That doesn't mean that God is old and out of date. It means God, he's been around. He has seen everything. He's heard everything. I mean, when I have a problem, God doesn't have to go to the library and research a solution. He is the library. He's the Ancient of Days. When I have a question, God doesn't have to read a book to find the answer. God, he is the book. He is the source of wisdom. Ancient of Days is saying, God, he knows. He knows. He knows. He knows. He's been there. He's done that. He knows which choices are going to lead to pain. And he knows which choices are going to lead to joy. He knows what will help us, and he knows what will hurt us. He knows how to heal wounds and how to calm fears, how to break addictions, how to solve problems, how to find meaning, and how to experience great fulfillment. Ancient of Days. It means God, he wasn't born yesterday. He knows more about this world than I do. What's happening in your life today? Are you willing to bring it to the Ancient of Days? Are you willing to put your trust in the Ancient of Days who's been there, who's seen that, who knows? And maybe for you, just take that phrase, that title of God, Ancient of Days, take that with you from here today. Let that roll around in your mind as you face whatever is coming in the week ahead. Ancient of Days, Ancient of Days. I know the Ancient of Days. Powerful stuff. The chapter continues. Verse 9, his clothing was white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A throne with wheels. Man, I didn't know God was a NASCAR fan. Throne with wheels. Remember, this is a dream. Remember, this is symbolism. Well, what does that represent? A throne that's on wheels. Well, that's kind of a crazy image. We don't know thrones with wheels. Well, here's what that symbolizes. A throne on wheels shows us that wherever God goes, his throne goes with him. In other words, God is always on the throne at all times, in all seasons. No matter what's happening in this world and no matter what's happening in our lives, God, he always rules. God, he always reigns. He is still on the throne. Great image. Throne on wheels. That's our God. Verse 10. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated and the books were opened. This is an image of judgment. Well, here's the thing about judgment. I think we all kind of like to be on the throne. We all kind of like to be the judge. Saying things like, oh, can you believe what she's wearing? Or, wow, can you believe he's dating her? We kind of enjoy judging, but here's what we don't enjoy: being judged. Well, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because God tells us this, Hebrews 9:27, just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. I know we don't like judgment. Right in here. Bible says no karma, no reincarnation, no second or third chances, no purgatory. According to the Bible, there will be a day when each and every one of us stands before the throne of God to give an account for how we lived the life that we have been given. How's that going to go for you? Are you using your life for the purposes of God and his kingdom? Thankfully, Daniel chapter 7 doesn't end with judgment. There's one more thing in here, and it's a big deal. Verse 13. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. There's going to be more than judgment. Someone is coming. Someone who is connected to the Ancient of Days, a rescuer, a savior, the Messiah. And here's what it says about him. Verse 14, he was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshiped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Think about this. Babylon, it was a huge, mighty empire. Is Babylon around today? No. How about Persia? It was a world empire. Gone. How about the Greeks? A small nation that went bankrupt. Rome, it's become a tourist town, but not a mighty empire. Daniel chapter 7, God is saying, a king is coming. And understand, this is going to be a very different kind of king. This is going to be a king that is loved by his people. This is going to be a king where people want to and willingly bow down before him. This is going to be a king that is honored. This is going to be a king that is worshiped. Why? Because this king is a good king. And his kingdom, forever. It's never going to be defeated. His kingdom, it will never fall. Verse 18. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. That's a whole lot of forevers. Daniel 7. This is one of the most important passages in all the Old Testament foretelling the Messiah. Every good Jew knew this passage. This passage was their joy. This was their hope. They all knew this one. Hang on to that thought. Back to where we began. It was something like this. What would cause a parent to do that? I think we know. But how about this? Mark 14. They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. What would cause a person to do that to another person? These people are mad. These people are angry. Jesus of Nazareth was brought before the highest Jewish court, and he was charged with blasphemy, which means disrespecting God by claiming to be God. Well, they didn't believe him. The high priest asks him point blank, Mark 14:61, but Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus. And if you're familiar with that, do you know what comes next? Very next words out of Jesus' mouth after he's asked, "Are you the Messiah?" He says, "I am." Very next words are these. Verse 62, "And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Do you recognize that verse? I hope you do. That verse is this verse. Jesus took this very passage, Daniel chapter 7, the one that we are looking at today. Jesus took this passage that everyone back then knew. They all knew this is the passage. This is about the Messiah. This is about a king who's coming, whose empire will never end. They all knew this passage. Jesus, he's before the high court, and he takes this passage about the coming Messiah and he says, that's me. That's me. Well, they didn't believe him. And they were so offended by his claim that he was this coming king, that he was going to be the one who had an empire that never ended, that he was the Messiah. They were so offended that he claimed to be the fulfillment of this passage, Daniel chapter 7. That's why they beat him. That's why they crucified him. That's why they killed him. Daniel chapter 7. Do you understand this now? Don't just skip over it because of the crazy mutant critters. It teaches earthly kingdoms will rise and earthly kingdoms will fall, but there is one that will never fall. And Jesus took this passage from Daniel and said, that's me. Jesus emphatically, unapologetically, clearly claimed to be God. Don't reduce Jesus to a good therapist. Don't reduce Jesus to a life coach. Don't reduce Jesus to a good moral example. Jesus claimed to be God. They killed him because he claimed to be God. You should know that at the Ridge, we're not just about spirituality and morality and a generic deity. We are about Jesus. We believe his claim. We believe he is the Messiah. We believe that he is God who came to this earth and became a man. We believe he lived a life without sin. We believe that he willingly gave his life on the cross for our sins. We believe that he died, but that he didn't stay that way. We believe that he was raised from the dead. We believe that he was resurrected. We believe that he is alive. We believe that he is victorious over sin and shame and guilt and death and wrath and hell. We believe that he has ascended into heaven. We believe that he reigns forever and ever and ever and ever. Amen. Yeah, amen, right? If you don't believe that or you're not sure about that, you're welcome here. Please continue to listen and to learn and to seek. If you do believe that, here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you to join me, and let's use these very same words from Daniel chapter 7 that Jesus claimed about himself, and let's use them as a declaration of our faith in him. If you're on site, I invite you to stand with me. I'll begin. There before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. Join me. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshiped him. Join me. All his dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Let's join the heavenly choir and worship the resurrected Jesus together.